Yes.
Hello, Jennifer Brown. How are you?
Hello, Genty Grace. I'm good. Happy Wednesday and Wednesday before Election Day. Hello. T
Yeah.
minus 6 or whatever we say.
Right. I feel like I want to say happy hump day, but it's like, all right, we're feeling a little anxious. So that's how we're going to have our conversation today with Martin, which
Hi,
I'm really
Martin.
excited about. Hey, Martin.
Hello, nice to be here with you women today. It's exciting to be on your show. Thank you for inviting me to come on and share some stories with you.
Yeah. I think this is going to be a good conversation because before we even hit record, we were already down a lot of different paths that I think will be potentially helpful for those who are watching this to help them navigate all of this anxiety that we all have as we are T minus 6 days out from the 2020 election. So, Martin, before we get into the just kind of navigating that and leaning into the possible and whatnot, can you just kind of share for folks like what it is that you do in this world?
Yeah, I do a lot of things, but for a living, I'm a prosperity coach and a teacher. And what that means, people who work with me, they learn how to apply spiritual wisdom and universal law to solve financial problems and create wealth. That's what I do specifically. And also what I just came off of, every day I've created a live Facebook show, a sanctuary, if you will, called Noonday Meditation and Contemplative Prayer Power Hour, where we gather together every day at noon to love and support each other through this pandemic, through meditation and some spiritual wisdom around that. That's largely what I'm doing right now.
I love that. And I was fortunate enough to be a guest on your Power Hour.
Yes, you were.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it was good stuff. And I feel like it's such a great way to just have some reprieve during the middle of the day, which is often just riddled with chaos. And it's obviously more chaos now than I think ever before. But yeah, so I guess, Martin, let's just kind of dive right into the meat of how you personally are kind of coping with any pre-election anxieties that are kind of happening, especially as we get closer and closer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a great question. And what I do with all my anxiety is I'm a contemplative. I'm a mystic, meaning that I use contemplative prayer to go inside myself to let go of all my anxiety and all my fear. And I've been doing that practice for about 40 years. And that's what I teach on my show. That's what I teach my clients. So, but I will have to say this, that the anxiety of this time in the world is huge. So I've had to rely on that practice very heavily to stay out of the drama that is we can so easily find ourselves pulled into. I was talking to you earlier about the drama for me to see on television. It was Monday or Tuesday, whenever it was, that the president was having that ceremonious confirmation of the new Supreme Court justice on television with all the lights and the flags, and it was a horror show to me. It became reminiscent of what I saw in old Nazi Germany videos, and the intent is to create fear. And so I was sitting with some friends of mine last night around the fire, and we said, if we know that we're shadow workers, we've all done this kind of work together, meaning that we look at the shadow. We know that fear is a shadow. It's the shadow of the light. And knowing that, we said, well, what's the gold in that? What can we mine from that? So we began to look at, well, what can we be grateful for in this world right now? And we just realized we're so grateful for the current, for Joe Biden and for Kamala Harris, for the courage to run for president. These are leaders who are empathetic, compassionate, competent, and trustworthy. And we need that so much right now. And we begin to think, well, we're so grateful for that. And then we begin to change the story to what can we talk about in the future? How can we talk about a bright future to get rid of the anxiety? We don't want to project anxiety in the future. Why can't we project love in the future? And so we begin to think, well, I'm grateful for that. Let's project they win. And let's project we win the Senate, and let's project we win the House and everything else. And now we're the predominant party running the country, and that would be exciting. And then we went further, deeper into that. We said, well, now that we know we've got good leadership that's going to move us out of this darkness, what about the people around us that we've learned to know over the last year who can support them? People like Stacey Abrams and Peter Buttigieg and Andrew Cuomo, Peter Buttigieg would be a phenomenal Secretary of State, wouldn't he? And then we went from anxiety about what we saw on television to excitement about a future that's bright and exciting and a better way of living in the world.
That's so good, Martin. This is beautiful.
That's what I'm doing.
I love it. We do not see what we could be celebrating, what we could be, breathing into, what is all around us, truly, that could be restoring us, encouraging us, kind of unleashing the creativity of the positive. Because it's hard to be, it's also, we create from the shadow too, right? I mean, I think a lot of us have been, as I think of it, like working in the rain, like learning to work in the rain, not waiting for the storm to stop. Right. But maybe we're so addicted to that in a weird way after 4 years. Oh, it's like we right? I know you probably have a lot to say about that.
We are so addicted to fear. That's what we're addicted to. We're addicted to fear and drama. So of course, when we look at this horror show on television, it does exactly what it's supposed to. We get fear and we get pulled into the drama. So what you're saying is what we got to do is we got to transcend the drama. We got to look through the drama to find the truth and to find the gold and to find something that's not. We all know that fear is just a shadow of the truth of love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally relate to that kind of addiction to the drama, where I feel everyone I know knows that I'm a cave woman, and I don't keep up to date on pop culture things. I do keep up to date on politics, but it's just one of those things that it's so easy to just go on Twitter and validate all of your fears. And it becomes that like compulsive addiction to just go down those rabbit holes. So I think it's so damaging, and it's so intentional by, like it's an intentional system to get you to be addicted to it, to put you in that fear mindset. So I love what you're doing, Martin, where you're just kind of flipping it on its head.
Exactly. And it's not just the Republican side either. It's both sides. All of the media pulls us into to watch their news by fear. Mm-hmm. And so what we need to do is what I do is I instruct my clients to it is to try to have a minimum amount of news in our life. Anything we can do to not get pulled into the drama is helpful. I call it a drama triangle. That's either the victim, the perpetrator, or the rescuer. And if I find myself in one of those positions on a subject or an item, I need to get off that triangle. And so what I do is I meditate. I go inside myself and let go of whatever I'm afraid of or whatever the fear is, and surrender that to a higher power within myself. And that usually works.
Mm-hmm. And so the victim, the perpetrator, and the rescuer is the drama triangle.
Right. We're often all three at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm sitting here thinking about.
When I wanted to kill the president the other night watching that show, I knew I was in the perpetrator, victim, and rescuer. I was in all three at one time. But that's my ego. That is where my ego, and we need that to navigate the world. So it's not like it's a bad thing. We just have to become aware of it. That's the thing. It's not that we're doing bad. It's just that we have to become conscious of it so that we can act from a higher level of consciousness.
So true. Do you have advice, Martin, on the amygdala hijack that happens when we have that emotional response, probably associated with the victim, perpetrator, rescuer? The body takes over. We have a response we can't control because it's deep in us. And yet, what do we do to get through that? What have you learned in all of your study?
What it is just fear. It's the fear, flight, and freeze syndrome that comes up when we get frightened. And what I do is I stop what I'm doing and I feel it. We want to resist that fear. And then I so I feel it and let it be part of me, and I just accept it. Instead of pushing it away, I accept it. And then I begin to inquire, like I did last night, is it true? Whatever I'm feeling that's creating this anxiety, and usually it's a finger pointing at me that there's something wrong with me. There's something lacking. I'm not worthy. I'm not quite good enough. Something is in there. So then I begin to say, is that true? I'm not good enough. Is that true? I'm unworthy. Is it true? Whatever is causing the anxiety, is it true? And normally it's not. And so what I do is then I say, well, what is true? And I flip it around like I did with my example. I flip it around, well, what's good? And I am worthy. I'm a wonderful, loving man. And then I go from there, and then I hold that in my heart, and I do something called heart space. I say, oh, I'm going to hold that in my heart for a moment and just feel that. So what I've done, I've transformed that fear to love in less than 5 minutes. I actually have a illustration called Faith, FAITH, that I teach people how to do a 5-minute transformation from fear to love.
That's so good. You can't suppress it. You can't make it go away. You have to sit with it. And what strikes me, the body's response is actually a safety response. And so that's in and of itself, that's beautiful because it's meant to keep us safe, right? It's happening because our safety is threatened, right? And maybe it's the ego, it's the safety of the ego and what we're protecting in terms of our I'm a good person thing, right? Which is, wait, that's not true about me, or, wait a minute. And I get defensive and I feel that threat. But I love what you just said. I mean, Jen, do you experience you're such a calm person. So I'm not sure. Do you ever get overtaken with the I can't breathe and I need a moment because I'm feeling, under threat. But does that ring true for how you process it?
Yeah, because there's the fight, flight, or freeze, right? And I feel like for me, it's flight. Like I can full on, so I don't get, it takes a lot to work me up. And if anyone's read my memoir, you know why. So I've got a lot of coping skills. But I feel like for me, I just feel really agitated, and I can feel it in the upper part of my body where I'm I just physically need to move. That's kind of the extent of what, I rarely have, an anxiety attack or a panic attack where it feels like it's all consuming. I can kind of recognize it because I work so hard on all of these things that I can kind of recognize it bubbling, and then I just go for a walk. So I can kind of release the energy from my system before it builds up and creates some kind of implosion that's unnecessary.
Right. Yeah, the more you practice this stuff, the more you become aware of it, so you can feel it coming on, and you can kind of head it off at the past.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of my MO, because I can feel it, and I feel like I've worked so hard to just recognize when anxiety is surfacing and identifying what the root is of that anxiety. Like on Sunday, for some reason, later in the afternoon, all of a sudden I just felt super anxious for absolutely no reason whatsoever, and I was really digging deep, trying to figure out where the origin was. And I couldn't figure out why, but I was able to rationalize myself out of that feeling of thinking all right, you're safe. There's no threat. There's really nothing that you should be anxious about right now. Look how good your life is. And then I went down this whole comparison of just think of your life 3 years ago versus now. They are night and day different and all of those things. And it's you know what? There's nothing to be concerned about right now. There's really no threat. And so for me anyway, I just kind of talk my way through it.
Yeah. Interesting thing you just said was that I came out of nowhere. I sometimes feel I'll just call it depression. I feel depressed for no reason. And I've dealt with depression in the past, but all of a sudden I'll get this feeling of depression, particularly right now, anxiety. And I don't know that but it doesn't feel personal. If that makes any sense. I feel like we as a collective, Eckhart Tolle says human beings are many humans and one being. We're all connected through being, through this life force. And I just sometimes feel like what I'm feeling is not just me. It's the collective of all humankind right now, feeling fear and feeling sad and feeling the darkness. Maybe we'd even call it a collective dark night of the soul, is what the whole world is going through right now, and it's uncomfortable. And I often make the analogy that we're in somewhat, it's kind of like a caterpillar going into a cocoon. We're in the cocoon and we're shedding off a bunch of old stuff that doesn't work for us. But the beauty is, this is what I was talking about earlier, is if we could project into the future the butterfly that we're moving into, then that anxiety of the darkness fades.
Yeah.
Beautiful message. I love this. The collective, it's overwhelming because it is collective. And I think that's so reassuring what you just said, that I think one of our talk about threat is being isolated as humans. That is the origin of, it's the opposite of feeling safe, right? Is that isolation. So we are community creatures. And then the perception that we are further apart from each other than we've ever been, I think, is also so deeply troubling, because it's not our natural, I don't believe it's our natural state. And it's being like manufactured against us as well. Like it's so evil, and it's in its like precision, because it knows exactly what terrifies us the most, which is isolation from each other, the breakages of relationships with loved ones based on ideology. Like it's inconceivable, and it's so deeply painful. And I think it's exacerbated in a new level, at a new level now than ever before. And so like how would you apply what we've talked to today to coming into this election time when we may be wrestling with very fraught relationships with loved ones of different persuasions? And, maybe you could relink what you were talking about earlier to how do we approach that with love and forbearance and space and grace and all those, things, and thinking about the art of the possible.
That's a wonderful question. And I think it's through forgiveness and compassion. I did a workshop a while back, early on in March, where the co-facilitator took me through a process called radical forgiveness, where I actually forgave the president of the United States, and I was angry. And in that hour, we did. You can see it on YouTube if you want to see it. It's called. I went from my anger to a place of gratitude and compassion for the president, because when we carry that resentment in us, which we're talking about here. If I have a resentment toward my family, who's a Trump fan, for example, that's hurting me. It's not hurting them. So what I need to practice, I need to say, well, what is the lesson here, and how can I love this person? And that shifts me out of that drama triangle. I'm no longer the victim of whatever I'm believing is the problem, because there is no problem. I'm just being able to understand and love this person from a deeper perspective. So I think that the answer to your question in a short way is forgiveness. Forgiveness of people that I disagree with, to accept them and allow them to feel what they have and believe what they want to believe.
Can you discuss what you identified as something you could love? I mean, and I'm not being funny. I mean, I want to know what you discovered.
I know that the part where there's two, our authentic self is just love light. Right. And the part that we get into discussion with and we get angry with are our egos. Our egos are bumping up into each other. So when we realize that, just to be specific, when I see someone like Trump, I'm seeing a man that was bullied. He was never loved. I don't see a man who's ever even experienced love. So out of that, and I know that somewhere in that human being there is a spark of life, of love, and he's never experienced it. So if I can have some compassion for the man who's going through life being such a darkness to the world right now, who would want his role, really, if you think about it? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the role of Judas in the story of the Bible. Who wants that role? So out of that, I can feel some compassion for him as a human being, of what he's going through. I don't condone his behavior at all by any stretch of imagination, but I can, from my own personal welfare, I can find compassion and forgiveness for him as a human being. And that's how I get the relief I think you're asking me about.
Thank you.
I think there's something so powerful about just all of this, because I feel like there's the expression, it's like me drinking poison, hoping that someone else is going to die. Like that's what kind of keeping that hate and anger and resentment toward us. But I also think that a lot of people might know that logically, but yet in practical application, they might be struggling, especially when we're in such a divisive time. But to me, I look at the silver lining of it all and know that without this situation, so many broken systems would not be coming to light.
True.
So much has been swept under the rug for decades upon decades. And now it's all out in the open for us to now figure out how we're gonna proceed forward in a much more perhaps cohesive way. I think it's going to take a long time before we get to cohesion, but I feel like it has to like really be blown up from the start, and just like kind of burn it down and start again.
Oh, I think that's exactly what's happening. I think we are in the burning down of it.
I am here for that.
and it is damn painful.
Yes, it is.
It is really painful and scary. And it's like, it's a little bit like faith. I call faith is the bird that feels the light in the dark before dawn. And that's what I'm feeling right now. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I have a deep feeling deep within me that everything is going to be fine. We're going to come out of this butterflies. We're going to come out of this more beautiful, more loving. And we needed to tear down the old infrastructures, the old economic systems and financial systems that were so toxic and so one-sided. And so I think that there's a lot of what's happening right now is these old economic systems and social structures implode on their own pain. We're able to create something new and fresh, as Eckhart Tolle calls a new earth. And that's the movement we can all get excited about. That's why we're all here. All three of us are part of that movement.
Can you talk about like light work? And you talked about, you called yourself a contemplative, a mystic, a shadow worker. And I've heard light worker before, but you just referenced, I guess, those of us who are.
A mystic is simply someone who has gone from sort of having a belief system about a higher power to actually experiencing the mystery of life through them. And I would say that I have been a practicing contemplative for 40 years, that I live most of the time with the sense that life is living through me, and then I get out of the way, and that's a practice. So that's what I mean by mystery, because what's in the way of that light is the shadow, and that's what the human ego does. The binary brain, to protect ourselves, like you talked about earlier, creates stories and illusions to protect us, and if we're not aware of that, then we can be taken off, and the shadow begins to drive the bus, and it controls us. And so by doing shadow work, we're going in and we're saying, wait a minute, I can step back at this and look at this from a place of light and love, and I can look through the shadow to find the truth. And that's what I mean by shadow working, because shadow is simply is space without the light. Something is in front of us. Something is blocking you from the light. The only thing that can separate us from the divine, who I call Joy the Wise Woman, by the way, that's the name for me, is our mind. Our mind can construct a story that thinks we're separated from God. And it's not true, but it can construct that story. And that's what the shadow is. The shadow creates a separation from our divine nature.
I love
there's so much shadow. God.
We all do. I mean, and I'll tell you something else that's exciting. The more work I've done and the brighter my light has become, the ego is not intelligent, but it's very clever. And it will constantly try to find a way to sneak in the back door. As soon as I get a little brighter, it will find a new way to get in and make itself and try to take over my life.
Oh my God.
It's very clever.
Why do you think, Marty, really deep question, why were humans given this ego that's so clever? Like why are we destined to battle this out in this way? Why can't we live in love?
Well, that's a really good question. I think it's because we need something to reflect off. We need something to grow. Life is challenging. I mean, in Scott Peck's book, The Road Less Traveled, he starts out with, life is challenging and difficult. And once we accept the fact that life is difficult and challenging, it no longer becomes difficult and challenging. And that's exactly the reason why we need this darkness. We need something to challenge us to grow spiritually, emotionally, and physically in the world. And that's the only reason why that's the only reason why that's my explanation.
Almost to form against something. Actually, well, when I think about being LGBTQ, right? Like when I came out in my early 20s, it was like, oh, wow, I'm now in this group who's unsafe in this world. It sort of opened up this experience for me of what might happen to me, what has happened to many generations. And then to, over time, come to realize it's this gift that I've been given, to actually see things and, that I would not have seen if I hadn't honored the love in my life and, the loved one in my life in this case. And then to see, like, to be, I guess, shaping against the homophobia in the world, the death and destruction in our community, the stigma of our community has motivated me and shown me a different way. And I think the love in this community of those of us who, are trying to educate around this and pull people along and support, others to support us. I mean, the grace and the forgiveness and the forbearance and the, the belief in humanity that like we can be a living, breathing part of our world and not be persecuted and not be, and have rights and all that kind of stuff. It's just, I guess like the feeling of, forming against something has been such a theme in my life.
Right.
Determining what I'm not going to be a part of and what I am going to be a part of has been this like tremendously transformational journey.
Exactly. I think you articulated that perfectly. I can't think of a better way to put that. It's exactly, we need that darkness to bounce. Like I was saying earlier, we need to be able to mind the goal. If we see shadow, we see fear, and we see the destruction, we know that it's not real, and we can begin to look into it and inquire what is true. The truth is, you're a loving woman, and you have a loving partner. It sounds like. And that's what matters. The rest of it doesn't matter, but you needed that other stuff to sort of bounce off of, to reflect off of, to find your truth.
Oh, so good. Just bouncing and reflecting to get to that phrase.
Excellent.
Martin, I say this often, but I feel like this is really one of those instances where we could talk for hours. I would love to kind of, and I feel like a lot of what we've been talking about is very tangible for folks, but as we're kind of wrapping up, is there like one thing, one action, one something that you would kind of impart on those who are watching or listening to us that might make their lives just a little bit easier to kind of get through the next, obviously the next 6 days, but then beyond that?
Well, I will say the most important thing that you can do for yourself is to develop some type of meditation and contemplative practice every day. Some way to get out of the drama and go inside and love yourself. The practicing the art, and I'd be happy to give it to anyone. You can join the Financial Mystic Sanctuary Facebook group, and I've created a webinar, a 2-part webinar. It's called Practicing the Art of Being Present, Your Keys to Living a Life of Love, Joy, and Prosperity. I would call it, I might even rename it, Practicing the Art of Self-Love. And that is the one thing I would say to do, is to make self-love your primary purpose every single moment of your life. And everything will change. And the way to do that, the way to practice that, is through stopping, getting still, letting go of your drama, and falling into love within yourself.
It's such good stuff. It's something that we struggle so much with.
It is. We berate ourselves. We belittle ourselves. We do not do what we started this conversation with, which was living into the goodness, like seeing that and having that be our diet versus the thoughts. And I'm sure this is the ego. You're not enough. You're not doing enough. You will never be enough. It's this, when you stop and really pay attention to that, we start and end our day with this. And then it's a poison that is running through us all day. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, I almost was so disturbed when I started cataloging the nature of the thoughts that I was hearing about I was like, whoa, 9 out of 10 are negative.
Yes.
And that's your diet.
That's the nature of the ego thinking mind. That's the nature of darkness. Like I've often said, don't blame the darkness for being dark. Instead, shine a light on it. And when the light can lovingly accept the darkness with unconditional love, we will live in peace. It's all an inside job.
Oh my.
Inside job. So good. So I'm going to just, for those that are watching now that might not have been here when we started, that Martin has a noonday thing on Facebook every single day from noon to, for a power hour or so, that is so grounding and just, it's a good meditation. So if you are struggling with all of the chaos, especially as we ramp up over the next couple of days, I would definitely encourage you to check out Martin's Facebook page and just kind of tune in for one of them. It's just,
I do it as much for myself. I'm in this with y'all. We're all in this together. I get fear and anxiety too, and I created that page as much for myself as anybody, because I need the love and support from the world out there as much as anybody else does.
Yeah,
that's right. Thank you, Martin.
Yeah,
this was beautiful.
very
Thank
much.
you for having me on today. This has been an absolute joy. Yes, we can just get together and have a conversation sometime.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. I think we could talk for days, right?
I have no doubt about that. Well, thank you, Martin. Jen, I believe you and I are taking a hiatus next week. I believe. I should probably have known that before we hit start, but nope, I actually think we have one on Friday. So I think we might be back, but we're giving ourselves a couple days of space to feel all of the feelings that will emerge.
Oh my God.
That is what you just said is very important too. If you're feeling something, allow yourself to feel it. And just if you're feeling depressed, maybe just stop what you're doing and go allow yourself to go sit and feel depressed. I don't mean go wallow in a pity party, but just allow yourself to feel what you're feeling, and because it's there for a reason. And just feel it. These are tough times.
They're tough times.
Nice.
This was right on time.
Yes. Well, thank you, Martin. It's very, very good to see you. And Jen, I will see you next week.
Yeah, sounds good. Be well, be safe, everybody. And